for sure. And the level of frustration that Nico had at that time was high. By the way, Jay Kidd's was too. And, I think Jay Kidd's kind of trying to distance himself from
Yes,
this.
he is.
Jay Kidd's frustration level was, I can just tell you with Luke, was also quite high. But, I was told at the time, hey, if we got to trade him, and obviously it's off the record, but they traded him now, so I'll say it. If we got to trade him, we'll trade his ass. And I'm like,
there you go. Tim McManaman is revealing that Jay Kidd had a lot more to do with that trade than what's been led on.
No, you won't. I seriously, I rolled my eyes. I'm like, okay, you're huffing, you're puffing. You ain't blowing that house down. Give me a break. Because it's a ludicrous thing to consider. And how many times, Juan, have you been talking to somebody and they huff, they puff? They're just talking shit. They ain't going to do anything. And I thought this was one of those cases. And then 6 weeks later, my phone dings. What? They actually did it? Again, I was told, venting. We'll trade this guy if we have to. But here's the thing. You didn't have to. You didn't have to. You went to the finals months ago. Okay. The weight fluctuates. There's some defiance. I get it. It's frustrating. Typically, historic production gives a guy a little bit of leeway. And I will just say, and I kind of included this in the last chapter, there are a lot of people who are very strong defenders of Luka who have either been in that organization or remain in that organization. And I'm not going to tell you Luka's low maintenance. I'm just going to tell you on the superstar spectrum in the NBA, he's not toward the top. He's not. You can go down the list of superstars. There are several who are more high maintenance than Luka. Somebody in the book says, ask Miami if they'd have rather dealt with Luka or Jimmy Butler for the last few months, leading up to the trade deadline. That's just one example. You don't give up that kind of talent if he's excited about spending his entire career with your franchise.
Now, that situation with Jimmy Butler and Luka is sort of correlated. Miami did not want to renegotiate Jimmy Butler's deal, even though he's up there in age, but they didn't want to extend him. Also, when you look at Luka's situation with that pending Supermax contract, that would have definitely put the new Mavericks owners into the luxury tax after spending $4 billion on that team. Us as NBA fans, we're going to see this become a trend going forward with a lot of these superstars as they continue to sign these very lucrative deals.
They could have had a decade-plus run into the future with Luka, and this is where the logic really falls apart. Nico Harrison's own words, he created a 3 to 4 year time frame. And forget what's happened. Obviously, the first year got blown up when Kyrie went down with a knee injury. Next year's in jeopardy. That 3 to 4 year time frame, you gave up to successfully build a contender around Luka, your first round draft capital in 27, 28, 29, and 30.
Yes, and what also gets unsaid is that all those draft picks, all those first round fucking draft picks belong to the contending teams within their conference, the Houston Rockets, the Oklahoma City Thunder, and the San Antonio Spurs. All those teams are pretty much in contention mode before they even cash in on those picks.
So just as the credit card bill is coming due, your time frame ends? And then how is that? And I asked Nico straight up in this weird no cameras allowed roundtable thing, how is that in the best interest of the Dallas Mavericks? He just kept repeating defense wins championships. Nico's obviously, he was running Nike's North American basketball ops for a long time. That's a well-paying position. So was being a general manager of an NBA team. Maybe he just rides off into the sunset. I don't know. But there's I was talking to somebody who's in an ownership group of another Western Conference team recently, and they basically said, I hate to say it, but this is going to be his legacy. This trade's his legacy. He's never going to work in the NBA again. And there are people around the league who are just you have to fire him. You that's the only way to begin the healing process with the Mavericks fan base. But Patrick Dumont is not there. He's not there yet. Now, the In Nico We Trust era has ended. He wants him to bring in an experienced exec, and I think he's realized okay, we've got to have some checks and balances that weren't in place. I think this has been a very educational experience for Patrick Dumont in his first full year as an NBA governor. Also, the realization of, hey, in this world, management's not the stars. The stars are the guys on the floor. That's what this whole league revolves around. The superstars are the guys who drive business in this league, not the bosses. And honestly, like, as frankly illogical of a basketball decision as this was, I think what's going to ultimately cost Nico his job is this was a terrible, terrible business decision. I think they might lose $1 billion worth of revenue over the course of what would have been a $345 million contract. Nico convinced Patrick Dumont that Supermax deal would be a terrible investment. And look, he thinks Luka's body's going to break down. We'll see if he's right or wrong. I don't care if he suffers a major injury. Luka would have had insane trade value on that contract, just like Damian Lillard did. But where was Dame? Dame wanted to go to MI somewhere. It wasn't MIL.
He wanted to go to MIAMI. It ended up in Milwaukee.
Yeah, so that's interesting because why? Why could they do that? Because he was locked up long term. So if you wanted to trade the guy, the Supermax was your best weapon. But anyways, the bottom line, Patrick Dumont doesn't understand basketball. Okay, you like basketball, sure. He doesn't get basketball. He gets business. He gets when you're bleeding on the bottom line. And this was a disastrous business decision.
And it looks like Patrick Dumont has finally moved forward because the hiring of Masai Ujiri signifies that, hey, he's here to clean up house, and the Mavericks could finally just have Cooper Flagg be that face and move forward with him in mind. Right there, we've seen a lot of layers to the complications of just the chain of communication within the Dallas Mavericks organization. And it makes sense why Mark Cuban is consistently on an apology tour, making crazy statements. Oh, I regret selling the team to the Dumont family. Oh, I was never consulted about them trading Luka, etc., etc. The fans are basically seeing the trickle-down effects of the culture that the man created.